Alright guys, so this is a different software, so I'm going to also kind of play with this one as we go. You guys are going to be my guinea pigs for all these different kinds of ways that I can do this till we find the best one. So today we're going to be talking about speciation. And so all that speciation is the formation of a new species. Okay, so during speciation we are forming a new species. Wow, I need a stylus. So let's talk for a second about what a species actually is. That looks like an E. Let's make that look less like an E. Okay, so a species is going to be anything that can reproduce viable, fertile offspring. Okay, it doesn't matter what they look like. Okay, it doesn't matter if they are very similar to one another. If you look at what we have here, the pictures that y'all have here, this one here, okay, these birds, they are actually two different species. They look almost exactly the same, okay, but they are two different species. But all these starfish down here, they are part of the same species. Okay, and so these two birds, if they got together and tried to have babies, it would not work. Either the babies would not survive or they would not be able to make more babies. Okay, but these starfish here that look very, very different, they are actually all part of the same species. They are able to produce viable, fertile offspring. Okay, so let's look at some different ways. Let's look at some limitations on species. Okay, first here at what is called a hybrid. Okay, a hybrid is not considered a species. Okay, what we have here on this side, okay, that is a combination of a horse and a zebra. Okay, and so that is, they do not, the offspring itself there, the horse and the zebra, it's viable. Okay, you notice this is a living animal here in this picture, but it is not able to produce. Okay, it has, remember, it has to be viable and fertile. Over here is what we have, what is called a donkra, which hopefully by the name now you can tell is a mixture of a donkey and a zebra. Okay, but again, it's a hybrid. It is not a new species because it is not able to reproduce. What is called a ring species. Okay, and a ring species will result in a subspecies. Okay, so ring species are organisms that they're geographically nearby one another. Okay, they are geographically close, and the ones that are geographically close will interbreed. Okay, like as we're looking at this diagram here of these lizards, okay, like the pink and the blue, those will interbreed. The blue and the orange, that will interbreed. Okay, that turquoise and the pink, that is not going to interbreed. Okay, and so the ones that are geographically close to one another, they're able to interbreed. But the ones at the far ends that are geographically far apart, they are not able to interbreed. So that's what's called a ring species, which will eventually morph into what's called a subspecies. Okay, you can see that diagrammed out here again. Okay, so I've got geographically neighboring populations. So they're closely related. They are geographically close to one another as well, and so they are able to interbreed. And so that would make them part of the same species, even though they have some differences. What you see here on this one with the lizards is you've got these lizards have some differences, in particular color. Like I've got purple versus pink and the darker color. So they have some color differences here. But these that are close together are still able to interbreed. But the ones that are far away, they are unable to interbreed. And so that would be a completely separate species. Okay? I like the mathematical example in there for you, those of you that are very, very logical. A equals B, B equals C, C equals D, D equals E. A does not equal E though. Okay? They will not be able to interbreed. Okay, so next we also have something that's called limited interbreeding, because this comes up too as to whether this is classified as a species or not. So remember, the species has to produce viable, fertile offspring. And so with our limited interbreeding, Right? This would be, the example here would be, in the middle, we have the domestic dog. You know, that's our typical dog that we keep as a pet. And the domestic dog is able to interbreed with these various kinds of wolves, the dingo, the jackal, the coyote. Okay, so they can interbreed with those essentially wild animals. Okay, but they are unable. Like this coyote and the jackal, they do not breed. Okay, this timber wolf and the dingo, they are not able to interbreed. So we have it's what's called limited interbreeding, and it's also usually limited in the sense that most of these offspring are going to be a hybrid result, and most hybrids are going to be sterile. Okay, and so most of them will usually due to a chromosome deficiency. If we look here, we've got liger interbreeding. I know we wanted to, most of us are very curious about that, and it always comes up. Okay, we've got a liger versus what's called a tiglon. Okay, the liger is the male lion, okay, with a female tiger, and the tiglon is a male tiger with a female lion. Okay, so that would be our liger and our tiglon interbreeding. And so what happens here usually is why the majority of them are sterile of these hybrids would be that there is an uneven chromosome pairing. So these will be sterile due to this uneven chromosome pairing. Which will usually happen during meiosis, okay, during the metaphase 1 of meiosis. Okay, and so there's an uneven chromosome number. For instance, let's say the tiger has 23 chromosomes and the lion has 25 chromosomes. Well, now we don't have pairs for all of those chromosomes, and that results in the offspring being sterile. Okay. More about what actual speciation is. So again, with speciation, I am forming a new species. Oh. Okay, so I think I fixed my typo here. So speciation, again, is our forming a new species. And so there are two kind of basic ways that this can happen. Okay, there is what's called anagenesis. Okay, and so that would be this portion here. So when anagenesis happens, I've got an accumulation of change that eventually results in a new species. And the old or the ancestral species, it's gone. It no longer exists. Okay, that ancestral species has changed so much over time that it has become this brand new species up here. Okay, and the other way is through what's called cladogenesis. Okay, and cladogenesis is this budding here. So I've got this budding formation of a new species. So my old species, you'll notice, it still exists. Okay, and so the benefit to this, okay, is cladogenesis. It's going to increase diversity. Okay, so cladogenesis will increase the diversity, and we always like an increase in diversity. Remember that increase in diversity usually, allows for the population to be more stable. It allows for, it allows for the population to survive usually if the environment changes. So cladogenesis allows for that. Okay, so we've got two kind of basic kinds of speciation. Allopatric speciation versus Sympatric speciation. And so allopatric speciation is going to occur when there is a geographic separation. So if you can see in the picture here, I've got a geographic separation between these trees. And so that is what allowed here for my allopatric speciation. This river came in and physically separated them. With Sympatric speciation, okay, there is, let me erase that. With Sympatric speciation, okay, there is no geographic isolation. So with Sympatric speciation, they are still right there in the same location, geographically connected to one another. Okay, so let's take a look at allopatric speciation. So allopatric speciation is, again, they're geographically separated. So here in the beginning, I had the same species. For some reason, they ended up on different sides of this mountain. Okay, and when they came back together, they are no longer able to interbreed. So that would be allopatric speciation. In this example here, when they came back, speciation has not occurred because they are still able to interbreed with one another. Okay, so why would allopatric speciation happen? Why would, when they physically have been separated from one another, okay, why would that result in a new species? Okay, well, if we think about it, we've got a couple of things that would happen here, okay? A couple of reasons why this could happen, one of which being the founder effect. Remember, if I don't have an even distribution of my population that went on each side of this mountain, then I'm going to have different allele frequencies, and so my founding population would be a little bit different than my original population. Some other things that could cause this to happen is they could have different mutations. If I had one mutation happen on one side of the mountain, yet not on the other side of the mountain, that could end up resulting in two different species, as well as genetic drift and selection. What if one side of the mountain gets a lot of rain and the other side does not? Okay, so both of these things can lead to this allopatric speciation. I say both. All of these things are reasons that could lead to allopatric speciation. Our founder effect, the different mutations, the genetic drift, as well as the various selecting pressures on each side of, in this case, each side of the mountain. Okay, so let's look then a little closer at sympatric speciation. So with sympatric speciation, they're still living in the same area. And so they have, for some reason, developed into different species, even though they're still in close contact with one another. An example would be what we have here. Okay, we have these beetles here that eat bittersweet root, and they're called tree hoppers. And they eat bittersweet root versus butternut. Okay, an example here would be their mutations. Okay, so this would be a case of different mutations. Okay, one of them ended up being able to feed off of a different food source, and so that has resulted in success for them as well, and so they have eventually become a different species. Okay, let's look at another. So for another example here, I have these fish. Okay, and this is an example of human impact. So these fish, we've got two kinds of fish over here. Okay, we've got a blue fish and a red fish. And these fish live in the waters of Lake Victoria, Africa. Okay, and normally, in normal clear water, blue light will penetrate much farther. Okay, and if we think back to a little bit about what we remember about light, we see what is reflected back at us. So blue light penetrates a lot farther. That's why deep oceans look blue. Okay, however, in cloudy water, the blue light is absorbed by the sediment. And so the red light is what penetrates deeper. So what we have here in the case of these fish, okay, is that eventually over time they have evolved into two separate species, essentially a blue species and a red species. And that's going to be dependent upon their ability to see each other and their ability to find food. Okay, so what has happened over time is in this lake has become cloudy. And this cloudy lake has, sorry, we're not zooming here. Okay, so in this cloudy lake here, I have a lot of sediment. And that's where our human impact comes into play here. Okay, that sediment didn't come naturally. It came from humans. Okay, so we have affected the environment here. And so in this cloudy lake now, the blue light is staying up here at the top. Okay, so the blue light is penetrating up here at the top. And so that's going to be a more beneficial environment for the fish that are blue. Okay, and so in the shallow water, the blue fish now are easier to see one another. It's easier for them to see their food. The red light is penetrating deeper, and so it's easier for them to see one another and their food. And this is where those types of selection come into play. So now we've got this intersexual selection that's going to play on this. Okay, the females are selecting a mate. Okay, down here in the bottom, the females are, it's easier for the female to see a red male. So if this is a female fish, it's easier to see this red male versus to see this blue male. So if she's selecting for a mate, she's going to select a red mate, okay, which eventually then over time has led to, what's happened here, where we have these two separate species. Ooh, sorry about that. Okay, so we have these two separate